This is a 1989 Honda Pilot 402 stroke. This one's actually a customer's machine. So we're gonna do a little work on this one today. So story on it, the guy was playing with some jetting on it and he kept going leaner and leaner, and he was doing some full speed passes and now it doesn't run anymore. So this thing, if I pull on it, it's just got no compression whatsoever anymore. So should just need a top end. So we're going to pull this motor apart, put a new cylinder and piston in it, and see if that fixes our issue. First step we're going to do on here is actually pull the seat out so we got a little more clearance back behind the motor. Then we're going to drain some coolant. So to remove this seat, there's just 4 big bolts on the bottom side here, so we'll pop those out and then the seat will be free. Now that the seat's out of the way, we've got lots of room to work. These seat bolts are kind of fancy looking. They would thread out part way so you could adjust it, and they would just thread the rest of the way out to remove. So water pumps right back behind there. We're going to pull that coolant line off, drain the coolant out of this thing. We'll pull the head off of it up there and see what this piston looks like, and then pull a cylinder, see how bad it is. So there's one coolant line on the top of the head, and then another coolant line right there, which actually runs over the carb. These carbs have coolant that runs through them. So I just pulled the spark plug off. Honestly, the spark plug looked totally fine. Sometimes when a motor detonates on the inside or melts a piston, you'll see debris on the spark plug, but the spark plug looks totally good. So next step, we'll pull those head bolts off, get this head off there, and see what that piston looks like down inside. Okay, all the head bolts are off there, so we're going to pull this head off. Oh, we still got some coolant in there. I'll try to get that drained here a little bit more. There's a little bleeder screw right there on the cylinder. Just loosen that up so we should be able to drain this coolant that's stuck down in the cylinder still. Yep, there we go. Try to catch it. I'm making a mess everywhere. Alright, we'll drain that out of there, and then we'll get this head off. There we go, looks like it's about done. Alright, let's pull this off now. Here's the head. And that looks like a pretty destroyed piston. Let me rotate this here. I just rotated the motor so it's top dead center there. Yeah, and this piston just looks kind of melted all over the place. So yeah, we'll get the cylinder off and inspect the bottom end too, and should just need a top end. So I think next step is we'll pull this muffler off. There's a couple little spring clamps down there, and then a couple fastening bolts on this muffler here, and then that'll get out of the way. And then there's like 4 bolts holding the cylinder on. It should all come off. On the muffler here, there was a couple spring clamps that just went right there, and then a couple bolt holes right there, and then one little clamp back there. So we loosen all that up, and the muffler should come off. Pull this cylinder off. There's one more coolant line there. We'll pop that off. The carb, I'm going to leave this intake and revalve assembly on there, and we'll just pull the clamp off the carb, pull the carb off the side, and then we've got 4 bolts, 2 on each side, and then this cylinder will come off. Got the cylinder off now. Had a tap on it pretty good. It was pretty stuck down there on that base gasket. We'll pull this guy off. There's the piston there. Inspect everything and put on a new one. So this is the cylinder that came off there. Honestly, it doesn't look that bad on the inside. So I think we just melted that piston. Piston on the other side definitely does not look that great. It's kind of an interesting failure on this piston. So it looks like there's a few spots. I don't know if it was the ring. And the ring seems to be intact, but like right there's a chunk of something. Let's see if I can get it to focus. It looks like part of a ring. So I'm not sure if a ring actually failed, but there's some spots like that, some deep gouging in the piston. That top ring is just kind of seized in there, but I don't know. It's like something was floating around in there and banging around a whole bunch. Like even there on the side of the piston. Looks like something's embedded in it. I'm not sure what exactly happened on this one. So this is a brand new cylinder that we're going to put on this Pilot. This one has been bored 40 thousandths over. Got a brand new Y-scope piston, gaskets and stuff. So off the old cylinder we are going to steal the exhaust flange as well as the reed valves and the intake manifold and stuff. We'll transfer that over there with some new gaskets and get this cylinder ready to bolt back onto the motor. So this is the reed valve mechanism. So this acts as basically a one-way valve, allowing gas and air to come into the cylinder but not exit back out. So I peeled off the old gasket that was kind of stuck on there pretty good. So we'll put a new gasket on there, and then this bolts back up to the intake. While I've got this apart and easy to get to, I'm also going to rejet this carb. So there's just a little bowl screw on the bottom side here. Pop that off. There's our main jet. So this one, I was told it has a 135 in it. Stock jet's a 140. We're going to go back to the stock jet on this one, and which should run just fine with that stock jetting in it. Here's our new piston. So these are all marked, a little arrow there. Goes towards the exhaust side. This cutout there is always on the intake side. The rings on these, they always have with two-stroke pistons. They have little locator pins. Right, let me turn this ring here. Right there, you can see there's a little locator pin that keeps these rings oriented the right way so that they don't catch any of the ports. Okay, so we're going to put this piston back on the crankshaft, and then we're going to slide the cylinder down. So another thing I always like to do is definitely oil up the rings and the skirts of the piston. I always like to coat the cylinder, give it some two-stroke oil as well, make sure everything's nice and lubed up before the first start. So piston is back in place now. Got that installed our circlips and stuff. We also pumped a little oil down in the crankshaft and everything too, and just to lubricate the bearings down there as well. So yeah, we'll slip this cylinder back on and start tightening everything down. I've got the cylinder installed now. And so when I bought my Pilots a while back, I got a nice service manual that came with it. So I just had it on the right page there a second ago. So torque specs. So the bottom flange bolts there, 31 foot-pounds, and then our cylinder head bolts should be 20 foot-pounds. So we're going to torque all those things down, and then we'll check some compression on it. The new cylinder and piston in place now, so I'm just going to torque those flange bolts there, and then we'll put the head gasket on and torque the head down, and then we'll reinstall all the coolant lines. We'll crank it over and check some compression. Everything is buttoned back down on the cylinder and head. We're going to check some compression on it here. We'll just try it without hitting full throttle and see what it does. Well, that looks pretty good. We're right at 120. That's pretty much spot on for a motor like this. Cool. Well, let's finish buttoning everything else back up. We'll throw this muffler back on, top it off with coolant, bleed that cooling system, check for some leaks there, and see if it fires up and runs. Everything's all put back together. It's full of coolant. Let's see if it'll start. Full choke. Might need to give it a prime. That carb is dry right now. Let's do that and see what it does. Gas was shut to off. Let's flip that to reserve. Okay, now it should pump some gas. Let's try this again. Choke on. Well, let's give it a prime. Oh, it started there. A vacuum line right there going to the fuel pump. It's popped off the engine there, so clip that back on. So we should be sucking gas. Let's try this again. full choke on. Alrighty. Well, it's running. Not sure I like the sound of it though. Well, after listening to this thing run a little bit and comparing to my Pilot and talking to the customer a little bit, I think we're gonna pull this motor out and inspect some crank bearings and stuff. They felt okay when I had the top end off, but after this thing started up, it just sounds loud. Even when I roll the primary clutch over a little bit, it just feels like there's a little bit of vibratiness kind of back in, a little roughness. And on my Pilot, I didn't notice any of that at all. So we're gonna do a part 2 on this thing. So follow along. We're gonna pull this motor and split it all the way down. Definitely do crank bearings. Maybe we'll put a rod in it too or something. But just rebuild this thing fully so that this thing is ready to go and no more issues with it. So stay tuned.